The warning klaxon echoed through the carbon diamond ribs of Polaris Spire, its vibration thrumming up the elevator car like a plucked harp string. Cyril Lomas felt it in her teeth before she heard the announcement. Hostile vector 32 degrees starboard, siege formation confirmed. The same calm voice every night for 6 weeks, ever since the Commonwealth fleet vanished and the Conclave Armada had taken low orbit, throttling the space lanes and blockading the ground. This time, though, the timbre of the warning was edged with something new, urgency instead of routine. She flicked her wrist, waking the maintenance slate grafted to her forearm. Telemetry scrolled across her retinas. Range markers, orbital debris maps, and a glaring crimson arc showing the intruder's closest approach. Siege cruiser Pandemonium and her escorts had drifted inside the red zone, the one line everyone in the station's command tier had insisted was suicide to cross. Someone on that cruiser didn't believe in suicide, and tonight Sarah had to prove them wrong. The Polaris Spire wasn't just a cable. It was an ancient, stubborn city that happened to be stretched 1,500 kilometers tall. The anchor platform, New Meridian, squatted in the polar ice at 0 altitude. 12 climate rings studded its length, each 40 kilometers across and containing its own microtown, water extraction plant, fusion booster, and swarm of defense drones. Sarah worked at Ring 6, the counterweight node called Ballaster. She kept the tether tensioned and the auxiliary masses swinging, the way an old-timed lighthouse keeper trimmed his lamps and chains. Below her station, the tether narrowed to a meter's thickness. Above, it widened to 3. And at the very end, pushing beyond synchronous orbit, hung the counterweight cluster 10 tungsten cylinders, arrayed like beads on a billion-ton rosary. Together they stabilized the elevator's spin, absorbing momentum from cargo pods that clawed upward from the surface and letting it go when those pods coasted free into high orbit. It was a dance as old as the Spire itself, stable and quietly majestic, until someone pointed guns at it. Sarah jogged down the magnetic ladder into Ballaster's operations ring. Everywhere cords dangled. Half-charged drones fluttered from perch to perch, and the red emergency glow painted the carbon walls a sinister burgundy. Most of her crew had gone groundside weeks ago on the last evacuation shuttle, leaving only a skeleton team of 5. Captain Jalen Ortiz, Station Defense. Karina Pike, Systems Tech. Yi Sun, Power Distribution. Cato Vickers, a medic who filled in gaps nobody asked about, and Sarah herself, the senior tether engineer. Ortiz was already hunched over the central holostage when Sarah arrived, his shaved head dotted with beads of sweat. He glanced up. "Glad you're here. They're nudging forward again." "How close?" Sarah asked. 70 kilometers lateral. At the tether width up here, that's practically kissing distance. Pike muttered from a nearby terminal. "Their point-dense turrets are hot. Gamma scatter suggests they're about to do a low-yield plasma burp. One cough would char our fiver skin. We lose loaded pods, payloads, and half the station." Sarah inhaled slowly. Months of calculated harassment. Shoot down a cargo drone here, spool a hacking worm into the comnet there, and now the Conclave risked an outright hit. If they sealed the elevator, the colony's groundside would starve. But the engineers who built the Spire had left a little mischief in their design. A counterweight system could, in theory, be weaponized. It was Sarah's job to ensure it happened only when, in theory, became absolutely necessary. "Comlink with the cruiser still open?" she asked. Ortiz nodded. "They sent us a courtesy note 5 minutes ago. Prepare to surrender and transfer route control. Usual nonsense. Let's give them a different courtesy." She keyed her slate. Far above, a tungsten slug the size of a shuttle obediently unclamped from the counterweight spindle. Its guidance thrusters nudged it outward until it dangled on a secondary tether 4 kilometers long. In the old files, they called these masses bolas. Sarah preferred the simpler term flails. Gravity tugged, spin tugged harder. The slug began a lazy circle around the main cable, gathering angular momentum. 20 minutes, she estimated, before it became less a counterweight and more a war mace. Karina Pike's eyes flicked up. You're actually doing it. Sira met her gaze. If they keep drifting closer, they'll leave me no choice. I don't intend to snap off our own line, but that cruiser is about to learn what a millennia of inertia feels like. You'll need at least 4 slugs to generate a kill arc, Ortiz said. His tone was surgical, not skeptical. 1 mistimed release, and we swat debris into geosync lanes. 4 it is, Sarah replied. Her fingers danced command strings through the slate. 3 more slugs detached in sequence, each spooling out on separate tethers at equidistant azimuths. From the cruiser's perspective, it would look as if a skeletal flower were blooming atop the Black Spire, a dead metal flower whose petals weighed 100,000 tons apiece. Sun diverted auxiliary power to the tether winches. The hum in the deck plates deepened. She winked at Sarah. Winches at 110%, slack as your sandbox. Sarah's mouth went dry. She'd run simulations 1,000 times, but this was the first live fire. She keyed channels to the station beacon. Pandemonium, this is Ballister Control. You have violated restricted proximity. Withdraw to minimum safe orbit or I will apply kinetic corrections. The voice that answered dripped polished contempt. Ballister, disengage your toys. You are not a warship. You are property awaiting repossession. Nevertheless, Sarah said, my toys are winding up. The line clicked dead. Ortiz exhaled. They'll bet we're bluffing. Then they've never met an elevator engineer behind on deadlines, Sarah muttered. She fed more slack. The 4 slugs whirled faster, their circular paths enlarging into disjoint halos. The elevator's master control logic detected the imbalance and tried to compensate by modulating spin thrusters up at ring 10. Sarah overrode the safeties. Let the line shudder. Let tensile fibers stretch. Synthetic diamond could handle the strain. On a private channel, Pike whispered, We're flirting with the 90 glove limit. Any higher and we tear. Noted, Sarah said. She kept feeding slack until the slug halo was 30 kilometers wide. Their orbital period synced with her station's rotation so precisely that, from the ground, the slugs would appear to stand still while Ballister pivoted beneath them. But to anything hovering in their plane, those masses were now scythes in a colossal threshing wheel. A proximity alarm shrieked. Pike paled. Cruiser launch point defense drones, 40+, vectoring toward us. Ortiz cursed. They think they can nip the slugs before engagement. Sarah toggled to the slug telemetry. She could fire microthrusters on each mass, adjusting phase to time their swing. But any correction had to be subtle. Brute force would ripple down the tether like a crack. The whip and snap the main line. She tamped fear it. Minutes ago, the slugs were passive ballast. Now they were extension of her will. She pulsed thrusters. Stagger so slight, the math was done in her head. Phaser in one slug. Delay in the next. Until all 4 drifted into a staggered helical dance. Downrange, the drone swarm approached. Railguns on their bellies glinted as they spat tungsten flechettes, hoping to chip away at the flail. Basters or smash the masses outright. A direct hit could crater the slug's surface, yes, but you didn't stop a locomotive by denting its cowcatcher. First contact came as a ripple on Sarah's monitor. Vibration amplitude spike, slug 2. That meant the drones had scored a shot. Then slug 3 registered a similar tremor. Then slug 4. But their velocities barely budged. The drones might as well be throwing gravel at a glacier. Inside Ballister's ops ring, the floor groaned. Ortiz's readout showed net torque climbing. If Sarah couldn't vent that energy soon, the tether might twist itself into a spiral fracture. She had to let the flails go. Prepare for cut, she said. Sun tightened her harness. All rings green for drop. Confirmed. Sarah keyed a final sequence. T-minimus 5. Tiny slicing charges would separate tether from slug, hurling each mass into a free orbit that intersected the cruiser's hull. 5. She thought of the Commonwealth haulers still stranded on the surface pits, waiting for a supply lifeline. 4. She thought of her crew hunkered here with her, willing to die on a cable because someone had to keep the sky road open. She remembered her father's stories of the elevator's first century, how a single thread had bound continents and orbits into one world. 2. She wondered whether those stories would end here tonight. 1. Detonation. All 4 slugs sheared free at once, no longer down guy weights, but independent moons. Their momentum, restrained moments earlier, now expressed itself as pure translation. The masses surged outward, obeying tangents determined by Sarah's careful phasing. 4 bright comets, each trailing slivers of tether filament that caught sunlight like streamers. The drone swarm broke formation, desperate to evade trajectories it scarcely had time to understand. A dozen got clear. The rest flashed into incandescent smears against Slug 2's belly. A stutter of static across Pike's console marked the end of their transmissions. Slug 1 whistled below the cruiser's keel, missing by no more than a kilometer. Even a near miss had consequences. The cruiser's gravitational alarm shrieked, thrusters firing to compensate for the kinetic wash. In that chaotic moment, Slug 3 arrived. It struck the cruiser amidships, 500,000 tons of tungsten compressed into one blunt point, traveling 8 kilometers per second. No explosion in the traditional sense, just the birth of a white star. The slug punched through ablative armor, through bulkheads, through the main reactor shield. The cruiser vented plasma, twisted, and tore itself apart in a silent scream. Slug 4 clipped the debris field, scattering molten fragments like a thrown bucket of sparks. Then all was quiet, orbital night returning, and the hunter became a drifting carcass, hemorrhaging atmosphere. Ballister's ops ring erupted in cheers. Whoops rattled the comm lines from other rings, each echoing the victory up and down Polaris Spire, but the cheering died quick, replaced by a more sober realization. 1 cruiser down did not break a siege. Sarah flipped through sensor feeds. "I need eyes on the rest of the Conclave task force." Ortiz flagged them. 3 more siege cruisers, 6 frigates, and a command carrier farther out. All still at station keeping range, their comps should be screaming about what had just happened, urging immediate retreat. Yet none moved. "Maybe they're stunned," Pike offered. "Maybe they're calculating," Sarah countered, "and they might decide retaliation is worth the risk." Yi Sun shook her head. "We can't pull that stunt twice. We lost 4 counterweights. The cable is unbalanced." Sarah knew she was right. The elevator could survive hours, maybe a day, before the asymmetric load forced an emergency shutdown. Worse, they had exhausted the surprise. Next time, the cruisers would send volleys of smart missiles or keep beyond tether range. "Options?" Ortiz asked. "We can spin up the thrust rings to generate artificial counterweight," Yi Sun said, "but that burns fuel we don't have." Cato Vicker stepped forward, the medic's soft voice cutting through the technical chatter. "We signal the surface and get evac shuttles en route. Brace for a controlled sever. Better to lose half the spire than let Conclave plan a second wave." Sarah stared at the holostage. Tiny sparks marked where the slugs now coasted, their earlier heroics meaning nothing to orbital mechanics. In weeks, they'd spiral into decaying paths, burning up in atmosphere or impacting some uninhabited tundra. The elevator, wounded but intact, still reached from dirt to vacuum. That line represented hope for every settlement in the polar belt. She wasn't ready to cut it. "Cato's right, we need contingency," she said. "But first, we bluff." She opened a general broadband channel, no encryption, broadcasting both voice and real-time visuals of the shattered cruiser. "Conclave vessels, you have witnessed the fate of your flagship. The next slug mass can be manually targeted. Withdraw immediately or be reduced to wreckage." Gymeth mouthed, "Next mass?" They all knew she had no next mass. The comm channel hissed with carrier static, then cleared. A new voice answered, measured and melodic. "Ballister Control. This is Conclave Carrier Morning Zenith. Your strike was impressive. It also destabilized your own elevator. You've minutes, perhaps hours, before material failure. We propose a ceasefire. Permit our salvage tugs to hold your cable steady. In exchange, surrender orbit to surface transit rights. Sarah blinked. Salvage tugs? Conclave would save the Spire so they could own it. Clever. Cut without cutting. She keyed mute and glanced at her team. Pike shook her head fiercely. That's occupation, not mercy. Ortiz shrugged. And the elevator survives. So do we. Cato added. Better slaves alive than patriots dead. Silence hung. E-Sun stared at her readouts. The elevator's sagging belly frequency had already deviated 3 hertz from nominal. Without counterweights, the cable oscillated like a loose guitar string, harmless at first, catastrophic when harmonics stacked. Sarah lifted her slate. Another screen nested beneath the main counterweight control, an archive she discovered months ago during a routine audit. It contained a dormant protocol labeled Sapphire Dust. Encrypted, top access. Today she'd use the elevator's official procedure. Sapphire Dust was the rumor of a rumor among old hands, the fail deadly. She glanced at Ortiz. Command authentication? He hesitated, then punched his code into the holostage. Pike followed. E-Sun, eyes shut, added hers. 4 out of 5 required keys. Only Sarah left. Ballaster control? The conclave carrier repeated. Time is not your ally. Sarah released her breath into the microphone. Morning, Zenith. We acknowledge structural considerations. Stand by while we consult our engineers. Make haste, the voice replied. She muted again. Sun, show me the tether stress path. Yi projected the model, a sine wave of ominous red climbing up the cable length. Ballaster had perhaps 40 minutes before the torsion node at ring 8 snapped. After that, domino failure. Sapphire Dust description scrawled, emergency scuttle. Converts tether into multi-stage coil gun using remaining counterweight anchors. Propels carbon filaments as kinetic lengths toward hostile orbital assets. Unrecoverable. Elevators above ring 6 will be lost. Cato read over her shoulder. That's not just self-defense, that's scorched sky. It also removes every conclave asset in low orbit, Ortiz said quietly. And slices our own cable into confetti, Pike added. Sarah thought of the years to rebuild, the cost in credit and labor, the families ground side who would endure isolation again. Then she pictured conclave Marines riding up the cable, checkpointing every cargo pod, controlling who reached orbit. They'll turn the Spire into a noose, she said. This elevator was built to unite, not oppress. Yi soon ran simulation loops. Sapphire Dust works if we dump remaining fuel from booster pods 9 through 12 into the coil capacitors. 35 minutes to feedback saturate. Only give us 1 shot, she paused. We'll be inside the kill cone. Ortiz drew himself up. We've already crossed 1 line. No point counting steps if we quit now. Pike wiped a tear. I wanted to keep this place alive. We will, Sarah said. Someday. She typed her key. Protocol armed. Broadcast to Commonwealth remnants, she ordered. Pike patched a widecast. Sarah spoke. To any friendly listening, this is Polaris Spire, Ballaster. We are initiating final lockdown. Evacuate approach corridors, look for the dawn, and aim for the gaps. Maybe a poet, she thought. Maybe nonsense. It didn't matter. Somewhere, someone would listen. The conclave hailed again, impatience creeping in. Sarah answered on open channel. Morning, Zenith. We decline your offer. Withdraw to 10,000 kilometers or share Pandemonium's fate. Absurd. You are crippled. You have 10 minutes to test that theory. She cut the line. No bluff now. Only mathematics. E-Sun triggered capacitor charge. Ring 10's fusion boosters dumped plasma roar through conduits. The deck vibrated with a thunder unlike anything Sarah had felt. Their elevator had become a gun barrel 10,000 kilometers long, and they were sitting on the breach. Conclave ships began vectoring away, suspicion dawning. But orbital velocities were not ground cars. Big ships moved with the grace of glaciers. The cruiser nearest the Spire pushed lateral thrusters, yet remained well within strike path. At 2 minutes, Sarah opened a safe room hatch. tucked into the ops ring bulkhead. "Kato, get everyone inside." "What about you?" he asked. "I ride the trigger," she said. Ortiz remained. Cap'n goes down with his gun. Pike stayed too, and Yi refused to budge. Kato shook his head, but complied, sealing the hatch behind him, probably cursing them all. 10 minutes, 30 seconds. Charge complete. Magnetic hold-down squealed, trying to contain fields meant to hurl fragments at 10% light speed. "Target lock," Pike whispered, voice raw. Syrah watched the hologram. Conclave icons crawled just shy of the lethal corridor. Almost there. She thumbed intercom to all decks. "For Polaris." Then she touched fire. With a soundless lurch, the upper tether disintegrated. Carbon filaments accelerated by coil stages stacked through rings 7 to 12 shot upward in a focused lance. No flame, only a violet shimmer as atmosphere ionized behind the departing shards. They ripped past the cruiser like meteors ascending instead of falling. Sensor feeds showed kinetic spears piercing hull fore to aft, slicing compartments open like pressed flowers. The cruiser vented thrust, tried to roll, but momentum carried it straight into another blossom of white plasma. The carrier Morning Zenith caught 4 lances in her port hangar. Secondary explosions lit her spine. She yawed, tumbling, integral frames unwinding like cloth. More lances fanned out, programmed spread pattern, carving through frigates, drones, even the wreckage. Globes of liquid metal formed and recoalesced, cooling to black slag. Inside Ballister, the world became shrieking gyroscopes. The sudden loss of upper mass catapulted the ring's structure downward. Braces snapped, walls bulged. Ortiz grabbed Sarah's harness, yanking her to the deck as consoles tore free and sparks stitched the air. Yi-Sun screamed something about breach seals. Bike station erupted in a hull plume, dragging her backward. Ortiz caught her wrist, anchoring her until emergency shutters slammed, and then quiet. Only the hiss of vacuum pumps, the groan of tortured metal, and the throb of their own heartbeats. "Damage," Sarah croaked. Yi's face was ash-gray. Everything above Ring 6 is gone, sheared clean, but the lower cable, reading stable. She blinked in disbelief. "Sarah, the elevator's lower half survived." Ortiz exhaled a ragged laugh. "We just circumcised a skyscraper." Pike managed a wan grin through tears. "Groundside's still connected. They can anchor a new top someday." Sarah opened external viewports. Above them, the sky was cluttered with tumbling wreckage and glittering carbon dust. Beyond that debris, stars pierced the darkness in hard, steady diamonds. No conclave vessels remained in low orbit. Survivors, if any, had fled or were too wounded to engage. She keyed transmit. "Commonwealth stations, this is Polaris Spire. Airspace clear. We may be damaged, but we are free. Repeat, the Sky Road stands." Static flooded back. Then cheers, then the chatter of dozens of frequencies lighting up. Pilots, miners, medics, calling in gratitude or promises of aid. One voice, warbly with emotion, said, "We believed you lost." "Not yet," Sarah replied, her own voice soft. Ortiz slumped next to her, blood drying on his forehead. "So, Chief, what's next?" She surveyed the shattered ceiling where the rest of the elevator once ascended. Dawn light filtered through a ragged hole. Somewhere far above, tungsten slugs drifted, and a coil gun's ghosts sparkled like a second aurora. "Now," she said, "we rebuild. We'll splice new strands, haul up new counterweights, and tell the next invader to mind the warning signs. The Spire's job is to lift people, and so is ours." Yi chuckled weakly. "We'll need more tungsten." Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle in, mingled with fierce, stubborn hope. "We're sitting on the biggest mine shaft in history. We'll haul up mountains if we must." Ballas's lights flickered back to steady white. Systems ready. The tether beneath them hummed, restless to carry cargo once more. Sarah pressed her palm to the deck, felt the pulse of the elevator like the heartbeat of the world itself, and whispered, "Hold fast." Outside, Polaris dawn unfurled across the horizon, catching shards of carbon dust in a myriad of colors. The broken sky shimmered, but the line endured, stretched taut between earth and heavens, a scar, a promise, and a bridge to tomorrow.